Welcome to another episode of Theater Corner. I'm your host, Michael Taylor. Theater Corner is an interview series created as an ongoing effort to promote more diverse interest and involvement in the theater scene. Today, we're broadcasting from the lovely theater at Elementary Institute of Science here in Emerald Hills in San Diego, California. I want to thank EIS for their generous sponsorship of today's episode. So silence your cell phones, folks. You're about to enter Theater Corner. Here we are with Justin Emeka, who's the professor of theater and Africana studies at Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio. Welcome to Theater Corner.
How you doing, brother? It's good to be here.
All right.
Thank you for having
really
me.
Appreciate you coming by here. This is a special edition of Theater Corner. You're
Okay.
the very second director to sit here. And,
Wonderful.
I really appreciate you having you. Before we go any further, I want to give you a heartfelt congratulations on being awarded the 2017 Drama League Fellowship.
Yes.
For classical directing.
That's right.
I don't want to mess that up. No, that's a huge award. I mean,
Thank
that's only 11 awarded in the country
Right.
of hundreds of applications.
Right, and there's actually only 2 classical directing fellows per each year. So there's 11 directors altogether, but of the classical directing fellowship, there's 2. So
All right.
It's more exclusive company.
All right, it's a huge accomplishment, well deserved.
Thank you
from
very
what I can
much.
tell. And then I brought the book that you've published a chapter in,
Yes.
called Black Acting Methods, Critical Approaches, and you penned a chapter in here called Seeing Shakespeare Through Brown Eyes.
That's right.
I mean, that says a lot right there
Right.
in the title. Maybe you could. There's some amazing insights in here, and I've learned a tremendous amount just reading through it myself. Can you tell us a little bit about this, and maybe even the title?
Yeah, Seeing Shakespeare Through Brown Eyes. That really comes from a lot of my conversations with a dear friend and mentor of mine, Avery Brooks, who was a remarkable television, film, and stage actor and accomplished opera singer and musician, who really was one of the first artists to invite me to fully embrace my blackness within the context of quote unquote white classical theater, that it didn't have to be a separate movement, that these were 2 things, as Avery talked about, Africanizing Shakespeare, which really opened my mind up a lot to this idea in general, and had me thinking a lot about music, and how the Black aesthetic really, as a creative force, has the ability to transform everything it touches. Everything it touches, whether it's religion, whether it's food, whether it's clothing, whether it's dance, whether it's music, whether it's visual arts.
Right.
The black aesthetic, leaves its footprint everywhere, So I really wanted to start to see, well, what about in theater, where is that footprint? And not just with texts that are written by Black authors, but particularly what happens to the Black aesthetic when it encounters works that were written by white authors, in the same way that what happens when John Coltrane plays, Roger and Hammerstein's My Favorite Things,
Right.
And what does that music sound like through his soul, in a way that doesn't replace what was done before, it doesn't challenge it, doesn't threaten it, it opens up a whole new dimension, in what this song can sound like and what this song can say. And I feel like there's the same potential, that is within quote unquote classical theater, these classic authors, when we unapologetically let the Black aesthetic shine through some of these texts where it's been discouraged,
Right.
You know, I mean, oftentimes as Black artists, you feel like you have to kind of ethnically cleanse yourself and leave your culture at the door before coming into the rehearsal room. Well, what if we get to bring that culture into the room?
Wow.
How does it inform the work? That's what I'm interested in a lot in terms of my work with quote unquote classical theater.
You've even taken Macbeth and kind of done exactly that thing with exactly that with Macbeth.
Right, with Macbeth, with Midsummer Night's Dream, with Romeo and Juliet. You know, I am not a director that says, oh, you know, I don't want to be a Black director. I just want to be a director. You know, I am unapologetically a Black director, and I don't think that compromises my ability to just be a director. You know, I can be a human being and be a Black, you know, and I feel like a lot of times there's a sense that you got to be one or the other. You know, my humanity, my artistry is defined by my Blackness, and it informs how I understand a text, right? And so anytime I pick up a text, I start to imagine it within the context of Black culture.
And so you talk about in here, like you give an example of like a white director with Black performers in the play, and it's a classical piece, and he's pushing them more towards like imitating whiteness, and not even recognizing that these are Black actors.
Right.
Which seems to be perhaps not the most agreeable approach.
Well, I think that as artists, we have to learn how to incorporate conversations of race and, even more important, culture into our artistic processes. You know, not in a way that the process then becomes about race. And I think that's kind of the fear. If you talk about race, well, then it's just going to predominate the whole production. You know. But just to recognize how race informs character is an important thing for all directors, I think, to understand, you know, and to be able to engage. But particularly if you cast a non-white actor in a role that was written for a white actor, what is the artistic process to create that role? What are you saying? You know, in my experience, there's only 3 ways to approach it. You know, either you are going to have this non-white actor play a white character, and theaters make believe, so you can do that. Right. You know, a child can play a grown-up, a woman could play a man. It's all make believe. You know, so you can have a Black actor play a white character, or you can have the character change, the ethnicity change to match the ethnicity of the actor. You know, so now this is no longer a white character. This is a Black character within this world. You know, and that might mean a whole lot. That might mean a little. Right? Or you can say, well, we're trying to create a reality where race doesn't exist. And this is what we call a colorblind world, you know? And that third way is infinitely more harder than people think. You know, I think a lot of times people think they're creating a colorblind world when they're actually doing the first way. When they're actually saying, well, we want you to play a white character, but we're just not going to say it. We're going to say that you're just going to play a human being, you know? But a lot of, one of the subtle kind of privileges of white privilege is that you can be talking about whiteness without saying white. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. Like we say you go to Howard, which is a Black university, but we don't say, and Howard is probably like 89% Black. So, you know, but we don't say you're going to, you know, if you're going to University UCLA that you're going to a white school, or if you're going to Harvard that you're going to a white school.
You're just going to a university.
You're just going to a university, even though it's majority white.
Right.
You know, so again, when we have to be careful in our artistic processes, universal by default tends to go to whiteness. And so when you say, well, I just want you to be a human being, a lot of times you're saying a white human being without knowing it, depending on what conversation you're having. So directors have to be able to engage in an informed conversation about how race informs the role. And it doesn't mean that it's got to then, you know, dramatically change how the character, you know, it may or it may not. Because I think there's kind of a fear that to say, well, to make it a black character, does that mean they're going to be doing hip hop and they're going to be, and that kind of shows us the narrowness, reveals the narrowness of how you perceive blackness, because blackness is infinite.
Right,
you understand what I'm saying?
Right,
you got high yellow black, you got dark black, you got Africa black, you got Haiti black, you got New York black, you got Texas black, you got educated black, you got poor black, you got infinite possibilities.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? And it's within that, kind of infinite pool where I tend to pull from my characters, because I'm really interested in pulling them, finding the infinite of possibilities within blackness, when we've been led to believe so often that blackness is this big, when really it's...
It's endless.
It's endless.
There's one part in your chapter that really caught me, and it's actually the part where you're talking about the Africanization of King Lear with Avery Brooks. And if some people don't know Avery Brooks from theater and these amazing roles he's played, they may know him from the movie Star Trek.
From the TV series.
Or
Star
TV
Trek.
series.
He was Captain Sisko.
Captain Benjamin Sisko, Deep 6 9.
Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine.
And now he was also, for some people will know from A Man Called Hawk in the 80s.
Right.
It was a cult classic,
But underneath, aside from those characters, he's done some amazing things on the theater stage. Mm-hmm. And so it's the part where you describe, Africanizing Shakespeare, and you were performing with him on this particular production of King Lear, and you describe, and it's majority black.
It's an all black cast. Yeah.
And each rehearsal, you warmed up with the African dance, and so you write, hearing the drums and black tongues wrapped around Shakespeare's text every day invited you into the world and gave you unique confidence as an actor. I never experienced black culture in Shakespeare. I started to recognize the iambic pentameter inside the heartbeat of the drum, and it gave me a new way to embrace musicality of Shakespeare's verse and prose. Hearing my fellow actors deliver the text, I could hear how the iambic pentameter was a part of our natural rhythm of speech, as opposed to some foreign speech pattern that we had to imitate.
Right.
That really speaks volumes into what you're thinking, what you're approaching, what you're trying to explain.
Right.
In terms of merging the classics with the cultural traditions.
Right, that's right. Integrating, different classical traditions, because so often we're taught as actors, we approach the kind of science of Shakespearean text as a very cerebral, quantified practice, and you mark this and you accent this and you write this down and you da, and that's fine. That's some, that's one approach, But for me, I couldn't own it doing it like that. It's hard. And the biggest struggle for an actor, for any text, for any character, is making that character yours, is owning that character, letting that character inhabit your body, inhabit your experience, And the more that you are incorporating yourself into that process, into that character, a lot of times the more creative and the more successful you are in delivering that role, And an actor doesn't want to be trying to recreate a character that's already been done. You're trying to invent the character every time, So really this idea of taking ownership, owning a role. And growing up, I'd been introduced to Shakespeare, but I always felt a little bit on the outside of the process, And I didn't have a right to claim these characters within my own vernacular and experience, And what Avery really did with that production was really invited me to, as I said, to see myself within a Shakespearean world in a way that was revolutionary for me, and I think a revolutionary for a lot of us who are in the room. during that process, you know. And just like with African dance, you know, you don't count out and 1, 2, 3, 4,
Right,
1,
right.
2. You go you know, and it's a feeling. You got to feel the rhythm
True.
before you can dance it, you know. And so similar from my approach with Shakespeare, understanding you got to feel the musicality of the language before just understanding it in an academic sense. You got to feel it. You understand? Right. And so a lot of the work that I've done with Shakespeare is a way that is trying to encourage or support actors feeling the musicality of the language.
Okay. I hear you, brother. I'm with you. So, you know, a lot of these large regional theaters, one thing perhaps that's somewhat of a challenge is you know, you go into the audience and the audience doesn't necessarily represent the whole community of that city, of that particular town. And so as far as potential black theater goers are concerned, what do you think are some of the things that perhaps hold them back from considering theater? You know, because I go to the Globe all the time, and I don't necessarily see so many folks that look like me in the audience.
Right.
You know, what do you think perhaps are the roadblocks or perhaps challenges and getting you know, black folks excited about theater or even consider?
But that's a really important issue, you know. I mean, because equally important to kind of creating a positive artistic and cultural revolution in the theater, equally important to inviting new artists into the space is inviting new audiences, you know, into the space. And so every theater in the country is really trying to figure out how to, you know, revitalize their audience, you know, as audiences become older and older, and, you know, the new generation seems potentially less inclined to go to the theater, you know. For me, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. You know, the obvious is the economic factor, that tickets are very expensive. You know, and it's a huge kind of risk that you're taking if you're paying $150 to go see a Broadway show if it's not something that connects with you.
True.
You know, if it's not a good story. So the stakes are high when you're paying a lot of money. But we also know that, you know, black folks will pay $150 to go see Beyonce or to go see Jay-Z.
I was going to say, you know.
So it's not that strictly, we can't say that, it's just money, you know. So I think also you have to look to, is it an inviting experience? Is it an inviting environment, you know, to come? Is there really an invitation? Because people go where they're invited. True. And people don't go where they're not invited, by and large. And I think theaters have to take a hard look and see, okay, really, who are you inviting into the space? And by a lot of this invitation becomes unspoken, you know, by what shows you're doing, by how you present the art, by how you advertise the art,
the cast.
How you cast the pieces. Because, you know, the black and brown communities, though, are also working against an unfortunate legacy when it comes to theater, you know. I mean, the first American theater, one might say the first form of American theater, as James Weldon Johnson talked about, was minstrelsy. That's the first pure, you know, American form, unique American form of theater, in which you had a form of theater that's one of its sole functions was to mock the humanity of black people, or to promote the dehumanization of black people, right? So black people are coming into a theater space that not only was it not inviting to them, it was actually assaulting their humanity.
True.
You understand? And so we are unfortunately inheriting a theater that bears that ugly legacy, that ugly burden. And that's not 100 years ago.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's 50 years, that's 20, you can still see, you know, kind of remnants of this assault on black humanity. You know, when you go into a theater and you just see yourself as servants. or you just see yourself marginalized, what that does to your psychology, what does that does to your sense of esteem. And I don't know if theaters fully recognize or realize the impacts of marginalization on Black audiences, you know, but we have to invite, you know, Black and brown audiences to be at the center of the theatrical experience, not tokenization, where you just get to have one here, you're the best friend, but to put your story at the center, and then train white audiences to see themselves in Black and brown experiences. You understand? Unapologetically, and not to come out of the story and say, oh, I didn't even recognize that they were Black. No, recognize that they were Black and recognize that you still saw yourself in them. You understand what I'm saying? And so that's in terms of the audience work we have is teaching, taking risks and training audiences to celebrate Black life and see themselves in Black and brown life.
Yeah. How much influence do you think the colorblind casting or the race-neutral casting helps in that effort of
That's a good question. I mean, I think that, you know, at one point, colorblind casting was progressive, you know, because just for its ability to incorporate Black and brown bodies on stage, you know, it was kind of an initial step. But I don't see it. I think nowadays the way that it's used, unfortunately, actually takes us back instead of taking us forward. You know, because if you're only, you know, using colorblind casting because you don't know how to see color, and you don't know how to recognize cultural distinctions in our society that are attached to race, then you're actually not addressing, you're not seeing me in the way that I want you to see me.
Okay.
And I'm still, you know, you're still deeming certain communities invisible, you know, in a way that if you're saying, well, the only way you can be in the building is if I'm not seeing your race or your culture, because I become uncomfortable when I'm forced to recognize that we have different distinctions, then that's taking us back. We need to be able to look at me, see me for who I am, and embrace me as an equal. And know that we are still brothers and sisters in the world, in the human world, you know. And I think, again, we fall back on colorblind casting a lot as a way to avoid conversations, important conversations on race and the artistic process.
You're going to be here at San Diego for the extent of the summer as part of this fellowship, the Drama League Fellowship. And so after that, what do you got coming up?
Well, this fall I'll be directing Toni Morrison in actually Lydia Diamond's adaptation of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm also working with Margaret Avery on developing a production of Glass Menagerie that's loosely set in East St. Louis that explores you know, the Black aristocracy that emerged after the Civil War. And I continue to develop these Shakespearean productions of Macbeth and Midsummer Night's Dream.
You're a remarkable person. And
thank you, as are you.
No, you truly are. I really mean that. And what you give, you know, in terms of knowledge to Black actors and folks involved in theater in general. I think, I don't think you necessarily need to be Black to really get something from the information that you're sharing, the knowledge you're sharing.
Right. Well, Lorraine Hansberry said, you know, that this often, I'm paraphrasing, but, you know, it's a misconception to think that in order to be universal, you have to be non-specific, you know, but actually you reveal the universal by being very specific. So although, you know, a lot of my reference points is Black culture, that does not mean I'm just speaking to Black people.
True.
You don't understand? I'm ultimately interested in the human condition. How I know to understand the human condition is through, you know, the culture and the experience that informs who I am, you know. But ultimately, you know, I want everybody to pull something, to be able to pull something from what I'm talking about.
Right. All right. So I look forward to many more conversations while you're in San Diego.
I look forward
I'm going to try to take advantage of that every opportunity I get. You're quite wise and you're quite knowledgeable about theater and classical theater, and I appreciate that. And
well, I want to say, but I appreciate what you're doing here on Theater Corner, because we really need more people who are interested in generating conversation that will help us, rethink or even revolutionize how we approach theater in the 21st century. And a lot of people don't necessarily have the foresight to be thinking in that way.
I see.
So this is what you're doing here is really inspiring to me and really validating to me as well. So I want to really thank you for having me here, and I wish you all the best and continued success on more shows.
Oh, thank you so much. Labor of love is what it is.
That's right.
So thank you so much again.
Thank
I know you got to get to the theater from here. You
right.
got nothing but rehearsals
right.
in front of you, and so thanks so much for coming by and giving us a little bit of the spare time that you barely have much of.
It's
You're as
been
busy
my
as you
pleasure.
are.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you, viewers, for stopping by for another episode of Theater Corner, and we'll see you next time.